Our first presenter is James Munro. He's a securities lawyer with McMillan. Thank you.
Okay, so look, we're lawyers. Everything we say today is for informational purposes. If you have legal advice, we know great counsel, but that is our disclaimer. Today, what I thought would be helpful is to go over 3 things plus 1 bonus point you should be considering before you go public. The next slide will go through 5 things that your experienced lawyer should be talking about to you during the going public process. So here it is. Issue number 1, your capital structure. Look, if you can't make your capital structure work on the Canadian Securities Exchange, you can't make it work at all. And here's what the Canadian Securities Exchange says. They have a concept of a builder share. A builder share is any share that is issued below 2 cents. They total up all your shares that you're going to have issued and outstanding on listing, and if your builder shares are more than 25% of your listed shares, you have a capital structure problem. On the other hand, if it's under 25%, your capital structure works. So let's have this conversation before you go public. It's easy to control, it's easy to make, and you just need to make sure that your shares comply with the CSE's policy. Item number 2, and we call this biting off more than you can chew. We see lots of issuers coming in with great ideas. They have their listing business that makes the listing qualification on the CSE. Then they want to have a pipeline of transactions, a bunch of things that they can get going as soon as they're listed. Now here's the rub. If those transactions have a high likelihood of closing, you fall into what's called a probable acquisition. And why do you care? Well, if it's a probable acquisition, you have to prepare financial statements for those companies that you said you may acquire. And the problem with that is it's going to slow your transaction down, or your financial statements simply might not be able to be prepared. So here's our advice. Keep it simple. List whatever business that you have in the cannabis industry, and then, once you're listed, roll out all of your other transactions in compliance with the CSE's forms. Now, here's one of my favorite slides. Have you hired the right professional advisor? I did a survey the other week, and we saw a lot of advertisements saying that lawyers or accountants were pioneers in the industry. And then you actually peel back the transactions they've done, and they've done very little or not at all. And here's the thing. Cannabis is a complicated industry. It's a very sophisticated industry. On the accounting side, if you don't understand biological assets, your financial statements will not be prepared in accordance with securities law. That's a problem. Same with lawyers. If you don't understand how you have to prepare your disclosure documents will not be prepared in accordance with securities law. Ask questions. You might not know who we are, but this is what we've been up to in the last year and a half. Now let that sink in for a second. We've been on the largest cannabis transactions in the world. Aurora was the biggest M&A transaction, followed up by the even bigger transaction. All of these transactions are cannabis-related or cannabis public listings. Some of them are U.S. assets. The majority of them are Canadian assets. We have expertise on both sides of the border. Point number 4 is more of a bonus point for today. And the bonus point is this. If you have U.S. operations, talk to your U.S. Securities Counsel. You have to structure your business as a foreign private issuer. And why do you care about that? Well, the disclosure obligations in the States as a domestic issuer are much different than the disclosure obligations for a foreign private issuer. And if you're able to structure your operations as a foreign private issuer, it's much easier to comply with your securities law. At McMillan, we have U.S. Securities Counsel right here in Vancouver. So let's move forward to the going public process. Here are the things that your experienced counsel should be thinking about. Frankly, these are the things that keep us up at night so you don't have to. Point number 1, you know your business, but do we? The very first thing you should be talking about with your counsel is having a high-level understanding of your business. It matters because we're drafting all of your risk factors, we're drafting all of your filing statements, we're drafting all of your continuous disclosure. Quite simple, if we don't understand your business, those forms will not be prepared accordingly. Now, during the going public process, you're going to get a book at the end of the transaction. It's your closing book. It usually has about 1,000 pieces of paper in it. It's a lot of documents. Have you allocated adequate resources to make sure that all those documents flow smoothly? Our suggestion is have a point person to work with your accountants, your auditors, and your lawyers so all those documents move very quickly. If you take one point from this presentation, take this one. These are your material contracts and what we call your personal information forms. The material contracts are easy enough to understand. We need all the documents that are part and parcel of your business. Why? Because we need to fold those into your continuous disclosure, and we need to understand your business so we can actually do those documents properly. But the other one, and the tip, is the personal information form. Those are the documents, if you don't know, that are your background searches that the Securities Exchange runs on any director, officer, or insider of the public issuer. This is an interesting industry. Sometimes those forms take longer to clear than others. So the point is, that should be the very first document, other than your filing fee, that you file with the Canadian Securities Exchange. If there's problems, it gives you time to deal with it. This is not something you want to be dealing with at the last minute. We talked a little bit about financial statements, but the general overview of the financial statements in any going public process, if they're not audited and they're not ready, then you don't pass go and you do not collect your $200. Your financial statements have to be ready when you're going public, so let's make sure that those statements are prepared in accordance with IFRS, which is the accounting statements in Canada, and they're ready to go as soon as you're going public. Now, the fifth point is an interesting one, and it's something that not a lot of people think about. You spend a lot of time and effort on your name. You think your name is going to be the next big thing in the industry, yet you don't protect it. And this brings us to the fifth and final point, your intellectual property. And really that falls into two buckets. On one side, you have your trademarks. On the other side, you have your patents. On the trademarks, if you're not protecting your trade name at first instance, you're going to have a problem. Somebody else is going to scoop it up. If you think it's a good name, so does someone else. So protect your name with a trademark. The patents on the other side, brands, for example, or strains of your cannabis, you should be protecting those as well. This conversation isn't long enough to go into that. It's just to highlight the two things that you should be protecting: trademarks and your patents. And our office in Vancouver has expertise on both. So there you have it. We have 3 things plus a bonus point you should be considering before you go public, and then the 5 things you need to be considering while you are going public. My name's James Munro. I don't have time for questions and answers right this second. I'll be outside the room, but there are my contact details. And in the term, I'm going to pass it over to our friends at Stockhouse.